Today, I'm diving into a wild story where a white cop humiliates a black man, completely unaware that he's his new boss. But here's the twist: it doesn't end there. Power dynamics shift, secrets unravel, and the tables are about to turn in ways no one saw coming. Can you believe that? Buckle up, this is going to be intense. Did you know that black men are nearly 3 times more likely to be stopped by police than white men in the US? Shocking, right? Today's story takes that statistic to a whole new level, where a white cop humiliates a black man without knowing he's actually his new boss. But that's just the beginning. The real shocker? What happens next will completely flip the script on power and justice. It was a crisp Monday morning in downtown Baltimore. The sun barely peeked over the skyscrapers, casting long shadows over the city streets. The usual hustle and bustle of people heading to work, the honking of cars, and the distant hum of life was interrupted by flashing red and blue lights. Officer Derek O'Malley was in his element. Known for his strict adherence to the rules, O'Malley had a reputation on the force for being tough but fair. But some people on the streets had a different name for him: arrogant. His square jaw clenched as he adjusted his aviator sunglasses, stepping out of his patrol car with the ease of someone who had done this hundreds of times before. The target of his scrutiny today was a sleek, black BMW parked just slightly outside the lines of its parking space. It wasn't egregious, but it was enough to catch O'Malley's attention. And there, standing by the car, was a man O'Malley had already made up his mind about before he even approached. The man, tall, fit, dressed in a sharp, tailored suit, stood with his back to O'Malley, seemingly unaware of the officer's presence. He was busy checking his phone, his posture calm, confident. To O'Malley, though, that confidence was misplaced. He immediately placed this man in the mental box he reserved for troublemakers. "Excuse me," O'Malley said, his tone sharp and authoritative. "You can't park like that here." The man turned, slowly lowering his phone. His dark brown eyes met O'Malley's, showing neither fear nor surprise, just quiet understanding. "Is there a problem, officer?" O'Malley scoffed. "Yeah, there is. This is a no parking zone, and you're obstructing the driveway." The man looked over his shoulder at the neatly parked car. "It's not in anyone's way. I was only stopping here for a minute." "Don't argue with me," O'Malley snapped. His voice grew louder, attracting a few glances from people passing by. "I don't care if it's for a minute or a second. This is my street, and I say when you can or can't park here." The man's lips pressed into a thin line, but he kept his composure. "I understand, officer. If it's a problem, I'll move the car." "You better," O'Malley muttered. "License and registration." The man handed him the documents without a word. As O'Malley ran the plates and checked the man's identification, he didn't expect to find anything. He was used to situations like this, guys in fancy suits who thought they were above the rules. His eyes darted between the ID and the man standing by the car. "Isaiah Williams," O'Malley read out loud, sneering slightly. The name didn't ring any bells. "Well, Mr. Williams, looks like you're all clean. But next time, maybe think about parking legally, huh?" Isaiah didn't respond, simply nodding. His calm demeanor was starting to get under O'Malley's skin. There was something too collected about him, too unbothered. O'Malley could feel the anger simmering under his skin. He wasn't about to let this guy think he could walk away without being reminded who was in charge. "You think because you're wearing a suit and driving that fancy car you're above the law?" O'Malley asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "You people always think you can do whatever you want." Isaiah's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Disappointment, maybe frustration. He stayed quiet, not rising to the bait. "You're not special, you know," O'Malley continued. "You step out of line, I'll make sure you're put back in it." A tense silence hung in the air. Passers-by moved faster now, sensing the thickening tension. A couple across the street stopped to watch from a distance. This was the part of the city where moments like these could escalate quickly. The threat of violence loomed in the air. O'Malley took a step closer, towering over Isaiah. "You want to mouth off to me? Let's see how that works out for you." Isaiah's jaw tightened slightly, but he held his ground. Officer, I've complied with everything you've asked. There's no need for this to escalate. O'Malley's eyes narrowed. Escalate? Who said anything about escalating? I'm just making sure you understand who's in charge here. Isaiah nodded. I do. O'Malley grunted, clearly unsatisfied. He wanted a reaction, something that would validate his actions. But Isaiah wasn't giving him that satisfaction, and in the officer's mind, that was more infuriating than anything else. You better watch yourself, O'Malley said, his voice low and menacing. Next time you won't be so lucky. Isaiah's calm mask didn't slip, but internally, a flicker of irony crossed his mind. He knew things that O'Malley couldn't even begin to imagine. The power dynamics between them, at this moment, were still in the officer's favor, but that would change. Soon. As O'Malley walked back to his patrol car, his shoulders puffed up with pride, Isaiah watched him leave. The calm expression returned to his face, but this time there was a glint of something else in his eyes, knowing, perhaps a little bit amused. Because while O'Malley strutted away like a king in his kingdom, Isaiah was already thinking about the meeting scheduled for the next morning. A meeting in which Officer Derek O'Malley would walk into a conference room, expecting just another routine briefing with his superiors. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have guessed in his wildest dreams, was that sitting at the head of the table would be Isaiah Williams. Not as the man on the street, but as the new chief executive in charge of the department's entire division. And when O'Malley saw him again, the look on his face would be priceless. The incident between Officer Derek O'Malley and Isaiah Williams wasn't an isolated case. It was a microcosm of a much larger, more complex issue that has permeated societies across the world, particularly in the United States. Encounters like this, where a white officer confronts a black man, are not just interactions between two individuals, but are often laden with the weight of history, prejudice, and systemic inequality. Racial profiling by law enforcement has been a point of contention for decades, drawing attention from civil rights activists, legal scholars, and affected communities. At its core, racial profiling is the practice of targeting individuals for suspicion of crime based on their race, ethnicity, or religion, rather than on any specific evidence of wrongdoing. The racial dynamics that play out in these encounters often echo the country's deep-rooted racial divisions, particularly in the criminal justice system. Statistics on police encounters provide a grim snapshot of the issue. Black men in the United States are disproportionately targeted in traffic stops, searches, and arrests. Studies have shown that they are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by police than white men. Furthermore, black drivers are nearly 3 times more likely to be pulled over than white drivers, despite being no more likely to commit a traffic violation. This form of racial profiling not only fuels mistrust between communities of color and law enforcement, but also perpetuates the unequal treatment that many people of color experience in their daily lives. The psychological impact of racial profiling is far-reaching. For those on the receiving end, these encounters can create a sense of constant vigilance, a feeling that one is always being watched or judged based on their skin color rather than their actions. It's not just about the momentary discomfort of being stopped or questioned. It's the long-lasting emotional toll of living under suspicion, of never being fully trusted, even when you've done nothing wrong. This is the weight that Isaiah Williams carries into his interaction with Officer O'Malley. The power imbalance, authority, and race. When a white officer like Derek O'Malley approaches a black man like Isaiah Williams, there's more at play than just a parking violation. In these moments, the dynamics of power and authority become sharply pronounced, often skewed in favor of the officer. This imbalance can be traced back to how law enforcement agencies have historically been used as tools of control over marginalized communities. For centuries, policing in America was closely tied to enforcing racial hierarchies. The earliest iterations of American police forces, such as slave patrols, were explicitly designed to maintain the subjugation of black people. This legacy continues to shape modern policing practices, particularly in how officers perceive and interact with people of color. While today's officers like O'Malley may not consciously think about these historical roots, their actions are often informed by unconscious biases that have been ingrained over generations. Authority dynamics between police and civilians often rest on the presumption that officers are in control and should be respected without question. But when racial dynamics are layered onto this authority, the interaction takes on an additional dimension. A white officer like O'Malley might not consciously believe he's engaging in racial profiling, but the assumptions he makes about Isaiah's character, intent, or perceived threat are subtly influenced by societal stereotypes. For many officers, the sight of a black man driving a luxury car or wearing an expensive suit triggers a sense of suspicion, as if such success is inherently questionable. In the case of O'Malley and Isaiah, the imbalance of power is immediately apparent. Despite Isaiah's calm and cooperative demeanor, O'Malley escalates the situation, likely fueled by his own insecurities or need to assert dominance. This dynamic is common in police encounters, where race plays a role. For many officers, the presence of a confident, well-dressed black man challenges their preconceived notions, and the need to put him in his place becomes a driving force. Isaiah's silence throughout the encounter speaks volumes. Black men, like Isaiah, are often placed in a difficult position during police interactions. Speak up, and you're seen as confrontational. Stay silent, and you're perceived as guilty. Isaiah's calm is not just a personal choice, but a survival mechanism, one employed by countless black men to de-escalate situations that could otherwise turn violent. But behind that calm exterior is the knowledge that, for all of O'Malley's bluster, Isaiah holds the real power, something the officer has yet to realize. The role of implicit bias in law enforcement. What drives these types of interactions? Implicit bias, those unconscious attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions, plays a significant role in how law enforcement officers engage with individuals of different races. These biases are not always overt or deliberate, but they seep into everyday actions, often in subtle ways. Studies show that even officers who claim to be colorblind or believe in equal treatment often harbor implicit biases against people of color. These biases manifest in real-time decisions, whether to stop a vehicle, question a suspect, or use force. In the heat of the moment, these unconscious biases can lead officers to perceive black men as more threatening or dangerous than their white counterparts, even when there's no evidence to support such a perception. This was likely the case with Officer O'Malley. While he may not have openly acknowledged any racial bias, his actions toward Isaiah were undoubtedly influenced by deeply ingrained stereotypes. The sight of a black man in a position of success, driving a luxury car, dressed in a designer suit, triggered O'Malley's need to assert control, to re-establish the power dynamic he believed should exist between them. Isaiah's calm demeanor only further frustrated the officer, who couldn't understand why this man wasn't reacting the way he expected. Flipping the script, the ultimate power shift. What makes Isaiah's story so compelling is not just the fact that he's about to flip the power dynamic on its head, but the way in which he does it. Isaiah holds all the cards, yet he chooses not to reveal them during the encounter. He could easily have asserted his authority, could have told O'Malley exactly who he was, and put an end to the officer's arrogance. But he doesn't. Instead, Isaiah allows O'Malley to continue, watching as the officer digs himself deeper into a hole, oblivious to the fact that his actions are about to come back to haunt him. This choice speaks to the broader issue of how power is wielded in these encounters. Isaiah's restraint reflects a deeper understanding of authority. True power, after all, is not about dominance or control, but about knowing when to act and when to hold back. The fact that Isaiah can walk away from the situation without asserting his superiority shows that he is already in control, even if O'Malley doesn't realize it yet. The moment of reckoning, when O'Malley finally discovers who Isaiah really is, will be a powerful reversal of the dynamics that typically define these encounters. The tables will turn, and O'Malley will be forced to confront the reality that his assumptions, his biases, and his arrogance have led him to humiliate his new boss. Officer Derek O'Malley was born and raised in a small town in southern Pennsylvania. He came from a long line of law enforcement officers, with his father and grandfather both serving as police officers in their time. Growing up, Derek idolized his father, who often regaled him with stories about the good old days of policing, where being a cop meant commanding respect, enforcing the law, and maintaining order in a world that seemed increasingly chaotic. These stories shaped Derek's understanding of law enforcement, instilling in him a belief that officers were the ultimate authority, above reproach, unquestionable. When Derek joined the Baltimore Police Department in his early 20s, he brought with him those values, rigid, unwavering, and at times outdated. Over the years, Derek became known among his colleagues as a by-the-book officer. His strict adherence to procedure earned him the respect of some and the disdain of others. He was, by all accounts, a man who believed in his own authority and that it should never be challenged. Derek's time on the force was marked by a series of small victories and commendations for his service, but also by an increasing disillusionment with the community he was supposed to protect. Baltimore, a city with a rich and complicated history, was home to a large and diverse population, but in Derek's eyes, the city's problems boiled down to a simple formula: too much crime, not enough respect for the law, and in Derek's mind the face of that crime often looked the same: young black men. Derek wouldn't have called himself racist. If asked, he would have claimed that he judged people by their actions, not by the color of their skin. But Derek, like many officers, had absorbed the racial biases that permeate American society. He saw the crime rates in predominantly black neighborhoods and, without realizing it, formed a mental association between black men and criminal behavior. He wasn't alone in this. Law enforcement, like many institutions in the United States, has long struggled with these implicit biases, the subconscious associations that shape how individuals perceive race and authority. In Derek's world, authority was black and white. As a cop, he was the one who decided what was right and wrong, who deserved punishment and who didn't. And when someone, especially a black man, questioned that authority, it was, to Derek, a personal affront. The idea that someone like Isaiah Williams could challenge him in any way was unthinkable. Isaiah Williams, on the other hand, was used to being underestimated. Isaiah was born and raised in Baltimore, but his upbringing was a far cry from the narratives often portrayed about black men in the inner city. Isaiah's parents were both successful professionals, his mother a lawyer and his father a business executive. They had worked hard to provide Isaiah with every opportunity, sending him to the best schools and encouraging him to aim high in his career. From an early age, Isaiah was ambitious. He excelled in academics and sports, earning a scholarship to an Ivy League university where he studied business administration and law. After graduating with honors, he returned to Baltimore, determined to make a difference in the city he called home. But even with his impressive credentials and professional success, Isaiah was no stranger to the way society viewed him. As a black man, Isaiah had experienced racial profiling and the weight of societal expectations throughout his life. Despite his achievements, he was often seen first as a black man and second as an executive. People in power, especially those in law enforcement, tended to assume the worst about him before they even knew his name. It was a harsh reality that Isaiah had come to accept, but one he was determined to challenge in his own way. By the time he was in his 30s, Isaiah had climbed the corporate ladder, becoming a respected figure in the business world. He was known for his intelligence, his strategic thinking, and his ability to navigate complex situations with calm and poise. He wasn't the type to get rattled easily, even in the face of adversity. But despite his professional success, Isaiah couldn't escape the fact that, in the eyes of many, he was still just another black man who didn't belong in certain spaces. The lead-up: societal perceptions of race and authority. The events leading up to the encounter between Officer O'Malley and Isaiah Williams were shaped by the broader societal perceptions of race and authority that have long influenced interactions between law enforcement and black men. The United States has a deep history of racialized policing, rooted in the era of slavery and continuing through Jim Crow, the civil rights movement, and into the present day. This legacy has shaped how officers like Derek O'Malley view their role in society and how black men like Isaiah are perceived. In many ways, policing in America has been used as a tool to maintain social order, often at the expense of marginalized communities. The concept of law and order has frequently been invoked to justify aggressive policing tactics in black and brown communities, where officers are encouraged, either explicitly or implicitly, to view these neighborhoods as inherently dangerous. The result is a system where black men are disproportionately stopped, searched, and arrested, often for minor infractions that would go unnoticed in wealthier, whiter neighborhoods. This racial bias is compounded by the authority dynamics that exist in law enforcement. Officers are trained to maintain control in every situation, to assert their dominance as a way of preventing chaos or violence. In theory, this makes sense. Police work is inherently dangerous, and officers need to be able to command respect to do their jobs effectively. But in practice, this often means that officers view any challenge to their authority, no matter how small, as a threat that must be neutralized. For Derek O'Malley, the sight of Isaiah Williams, a confident, well-dressed black man driving an expensive car, immediately triggered a series of assumptions. In Derek's mind, Isaiah didn't fit the mold of someone who should be in that position. Perhaps Isaiah had done something illegal to acquire such a car, or maybe he was trying to flaunt his wealth in a way that Derek found disrespectful. Whatever the case, Derek's instinct was to reassert his authority, to remind Isaiah that no matter how successful or composed he appeared, the officer was still in charge. Isaiah, for his part, had encountered men like Derek before. He had spent much of his life navigating spaces where he wasn't fully accepted, where people in positions of power questioned his right to be there. He knew that challenging Derek in that moment would only escalate the situation, so he remained calm, refusing to give the officer the reaction he wanted. Isaiah understood that the true power didn't lie in Derek's badge or his threats. It lay in the knowledge that soon Derek would find out who Isaiah really was, and when that happened, the dynamic between them would shift completely. A collision of perceptions. The encounter between Derek and Isaiah was not just a personal clash, but a reflection of the larger societal dynamics at play. Derek represented the authority of a system that had long viewed black men with suspicion, while Isaiah embodied the resilience and success of those who had overcome that system's obstacles. Both men were shaped by their experiences, their identities, and the roles they were expected to play in society. Derek believed he was in control, that his badge gave him the right to humiliate and belittle Isaiah. But what he didn't realize was that Isaiah held a different kind of power, the power of knowledge, of restraint, and of the truth that would soon come to light. In a society where race and authority are so often intertwined, this encounter would soon prove that appearances can be deceiving, and that the true balance of power can shift in an instant. Officer Derek O'Malley sat at his desk, sifting through the mundane paperwork that came with closing out his shift. He felt tired, not just from the day, but from the slow erosion of his spirit that each interaction on the streets seemed to chip away. Dealing with the usual complaints, citations, and confrontations, it was all routine now. His earlier encounter with the black man driving the luxury car had already begun to fade into the haze of his day, another interaction where he had to assert authority over someone who probably thought they were above the law. He glanced at the clock. Just a few more minutes until he could clock out. But then, a voice from the station's entrance cut through the room, carrying with it an unspoken tension. "O'Malley, you're needed in the conference room," said Captain Thompson. The unusual tone in the captain's voice caught Derek's attention. There was something in it, urgency mixed with apprehension. He frowned, wondering what this could be about, but dismissed it as another routine meeting. Derek stood and made his way to the conference room, adjusting his uniform out of habit. He liked to present himself as someone in control, sharp, always ready to uphold the law. As he walked, thoughts of the incident earlier briefly resurfaced. Had he been too harsh? The guy had been smug, he remembered. Too calm, too confident. But what was the harm in that? Derek had done what he needed to do, as always. The door to the conference room was slightly ajar. Derek pushed it open, expecting to see his captain, maybe a couple of other officers. Instead, as he entered the room, his breath caught in his throat. There, standing by the large window with his back to the door, was the man from earlier, the black man he had humiliated on the street just hours before, Isaiah Williams. But now, Isaiah wasn't dressed in the designer suit Derek had mocked him for. He wore something far more intimidating, a tailored corporate ensemble with a subtle but undeniable air of authority. The aura of control that Isaiah had exuded earlier now seemed amplified tenfold, as though every inch of the room was under his command. The shock hit Derek like a punch to the gut. Before he could process it, Captain Thompson cleared his throat. "Officer O'Malley," the captain started, his voice noticeably formal. "I'd like to introduce you to Isaiah Williams, your new superior. Mr. Williams is the CEO of the Williams Corporation, which, as of last week, acquired significant shares in the public security sector, making him one of our primary benefactors and, effectively, our boss." Derek's world came crashing down in that instant. He felt his legs weaken, but he forced himself to stand still, his face draining of color. The smug arrogance he had displayed earlier was gone, replaced by a gnawing dread that clawed at his insides. His brain. Topics that challenge the way we see the world. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on upcoming videos. Scrambled to catch up. This man was his boss? Isaiah turned slowly to face him, a calm, unreadable expression on his face. His eyes locked onto Derek's, but he didn't speak right away. Instead, he seemed to let the silence grow heavier, allowing the gravity of the situation to sink in fully. The tension in the room was palpable. Derek's palms began to sweat. A flood of thoughts raced through Derek's mind. He had barked at this man on the side of the road, had treated him with condescension, throwing his weight around like some authority figure over a nobody. He had humiliated Isaiah, mocking him for his car, his clothes, and his confidence, all because he had assumed he was just another black man trying to show off. But now he stood before a man who could make or break his career with a single word. "Officer O'Malley," Isaiah finally said, his voice cool but steady. "I believe we've met before." His words were careful, measured. There was no anger in them, no hint of the indignation Derek would have expected. But that calmness made the tension worse. Derek could barely form a response, his mouth dry. Yes, sir," he stammered, feeling small under Isaiah's unblinking gaze. Isaiah stepped forward, the weight of his presence filling the room. "Earlier today you pulled me over." He let the words hang in the air, a subtle reminder of the encounter. "You seemed very concerned with how I acquired my vehicle, and as I recall, you made a number of assumptions." Derek's throat tightened. Assumptions. The word hit harder than any punch. He had misjudged Isaiah in every way possible. In that moment, Derek's carefully constructed image of himself, his authority, his control, his confidence, crumbled. Isaiah's voice remained calm, but now there was a slight edge to it. "You seemed convinced that I didn't belong in that car, in that neighborhood, and you made it quite clear that you thought I should be put in my place." Derek's mind screamed at him to say something, to explain, to apologize. But no words came out. He couldn't deny what had happened. The incident replayed in his head with brutal clarity, the patronizing tone, the subtle threats, the way he had used his badge to intimidate a man he now knew was far more powerful than him. Isaiah held Derek's gaze for a moment longer before turning to Captain Thompson. "Captain, I'm here today to discuss some important changes in the department's leadership structure. I'll be overseeing a few new initiatives aimed at improving the relationship between law enforcement and the communities they serve." Captain Thompson nodded, seemingly oblivious to the personal tension filling the room. Derek stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest as Isaiah continued to speak. Every word felt like a blow, not because Isaiah was threatening him, but because of the calm, professional way he carried himself, so starkly different from the man Derek had assumed him to be. Derek felt the walls closing in on him. Isaiah paused, then looked at Derek again, his expression unreadable. We're going to focus on accountability and respect, both within the force and outside of it. I trust that everyone will be on board with these changes. There was no need for threats. The message was clear. Derek had been put in his place, but not in the way he had expected. His world, his sense of superiority, had been shattered by the very man he had tried to diminish. Isaiah turned to leave, and as he walked past Derek, he didn't stop, didn't look back. There was no need to. The shift in power was complete. Derek, now pale and shaken, stood there, grappling with the full weight of what had just happened. He had never felt so small in his life. And as the door closed behind Isaiah, Derek realized that this was only the beginning. The incident between Officer Derek O'Malley and Isaiah Williams highlights several key takeaways, reinforcing important themes about misunderstanding and the necessity of recognizing individuals beyond racial stereotypes. Misjudgment based on racial assumptions. Derek's initial treatment of Isaiah is rooted in racial profiling and implicit bias. He assumed without evidence that Isaiah, being a black man driving a luxury car, was likely involved in something suspicious. This reflects a broader societal issue where black individuals are often seen through the lens of suspicion and criminality, regardless of their actual background. Authority and power dynamics. Derek's sense of authority as a police officer leads him to overstep, belittling Isaiah without realizing Isaiah holds even more power in a different context. This reveals the dangers of conflating authority with superiority and failing to recognize that power and worth come in many forms, not just through official positions like law enforcement. The importance of seeing individuals as more than their race. Derek's shock when discovering Isaiah is his boss demonstrates how shallow and damaging racial assumptions can be. Isaiah's calm, composed handling of the situation, despite Derek's humiliation of him earlier, underscores the need to see people as individuals, not as stereotypes tied to their race or appearance. Humility and accountability. The incident is a lesson in humility for Derek, who is forced to confront his biases and reconsider how he approaches his role as a police officer. It also speaks to the importance of accountability within law enforcement, as respect and fairness should be extended to all, regardless of perceived status. If this incident got you thinking, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let's dive into the conversation. What do you think about the themes of misunderstanding, racial profiling, and authority dynamics? Your insights matter, and I'm eager to see how this story resonates with you. And don't forget to check out my other videos for more powerful stories and discussions on T-ICE.